The heat in Kinshasa was a living thing, a humid, suffocating blanket that even the massive air conditioning units in President Mobutu Sese Seko's palace could only fight to a standstill. It was August 1972, and the polished floors of the presidential office in Zaire reflected the wealth of a nation and the absolute power of its master. Mobutu, the man who called himself the Leopard of Zaire, sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of hardwood, contemplating a crisis not of his own making, but one that demanded his unique intervention. Mobutu was, by all measures, the darling of the Western world. He wore the abacost, a symbol of African authenticity, and his iconic leopard skin hat, a theatrical flourish that commanded global attention. But underneath the carefully constructed Africanist facade, lay a deep, unbreakable covenant with Washington, Paris, and Brussels. He was their man. He was reliably anti-communist, ruthlessly efficient in stabilizing Central Africa against Soviet influence, and, crucially, he ensured that Zaire's vast copper, cobalt, and diamond mines operated smoothly, with profits flowing generously back to Western capitals. They provided the cash, the jets, the training, and the diplomatic cover. Mobutu, in turn, provided the stability. But in Kampala, 1,400 kilometers to the east, a different kind of strongman was dismantling the established order with reckless abandon. Idi Amin Dada, the self-proclaimed conqueror of the British Empire, had just issued the most shocking decree of the post-colonial era. All 80,000 people of Asian descent in Uganda, holding British, Indian, or Ugandan passports, had 90 days to leave the country. The West was in a panic. London was reeling at the prospect of tens of thousands of suddenly stateless citizens arriving on its shores. More than the social cost, the economic disaster was immediate. The Asians formed the backbone of Uganda's economy. They were the factory owners, the commercial farmers, the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, the mechanics, the shopkeepers. Their abrupt removal would not just destabilize Uganda, it would stop it dead. The phones burned between Whitehall and the White House. They couldn't send the Royal Marines. They couldn't impose sanctions, which would only starve the common Ugandan and fail to deter the increasingly erratic general. They needed a fixer, a diplomat who spoke the language of brute power, a man Amin might actually listen to. They needed Mobutu. The envoy, a weary American diplomat, delivered the message in Kinshasa. President Mobutu, you are the senior statesman. You know the general better than any of us. You are the only one he respects as an equal. You must appeal to his reason, to his sense of Pan-African unity. Tell him this act will ruin not just Uganda, but the image of every African nation in the world. You must go, as the representative of sanity. Mobutu, ever the pragmatist, understood the assignment. This wasn't about saving the Asians. It was about protecting the delicate, profitable equilibrium of Cold War Africa. If Uganda collapsed into chaos, the ripple effects could threaten his own stability. He agreed to go. He knew he was carrying not just the diplomatic weight of Zaire, but the desperate, almost pleading mandate of the entire Western world. The flight into the lion's den. Mobutu's customized Boeing 707, a luxury flying palace, cut through the sky, a silver dart carrying the weight of international diplomacy. Inside, Mobutu was a whirlwind of planning, dictating strategy notes to his nervous aides in flawless, rhythmic French. He was running scenarios, trying to find the crack in Amin's armor. He had always regarded Amin as a brute, a necessary, often amusing caricature of African strength, but fundamentally an unsophisticated soldier whose power was based on sheer physical intimidation, unlike Mobutu's, which was built on structural intelligence and deep political webbing. How do you argue with a man who believes his strategy comes from God? Mobutu thought. His plan was tiered. The soldier appealed to the practical logistics of running a country. How will the trucks run without mechanics? The statesman appealed to the OAU, to the dignity of the African Revolution. Don't imbountenant. The brother appealed to personal solidarity, urging a slower, managed transition over 5 years, not 90 days of chaos. The threat, subtle, remind Amin that isolation only leads to dependence on less savory, and more demanding, benefactors. The USSR, Gaddafi's Libya. As the 707 began its descent over Lake Victoria towards Entebbe, Mobutu straightened his abacost and adjusted his hat. He was ready to play the role of the leopard, the cunning older brother, come to save the foolish younger sibling from himself. The airport reception was military perfection, a crisp, silent guard of honor. But the air around the terminal was tense, thick with an almost palpable sense of paranoia. This was not the joyous, slightly chaotic atmosphere of Kinshasa. This was the kingdom of fear. The contrast of power. The meeting was held in a stark, heavily guarded conference room at the Entebbe State House. It lacked the opulence Mobutu was accustomed to. It was built for functionality, not display. The only source of rhythmic background noise was a struggling, wheezing air conditioning unit that failed to fully counter the heat. When Amin entered, he was a spectacle. Massive, wearing an immaculate uniform heavy with medals, he filled the space with his presence. His handshake was crushing, his smile unnervingly broad, but his eyes, small and quick, missed nothing. "My brother, the leopard!" Amin boomed, his voice a tidal wave, drowning out the air conditioner. "You bring the wisdom of the Congo to our little war. I have just had a vision about my wrestling future. You must hear this story first." Mobutu's first task was to steer the conversation away from the general's latest absurd claim. He was prone to declaring himself the greatest anything. Field Marshal Dada, Mobutu began, choosing his words carefully, his French precise and measured. "Your reputation as a revolutionary is known across the world. You are a giant. Your intention to liberate your people economically is a noble aim, one all of Africa supports. But as a soldier, you understand tactics. You understand logistics." He paused, leaning slightly across the table, his eyes holding Amin's. "This, my brother, is a logistical catastrophe. You are attempting to remove the entire engine of your national vehicle in 90 days. The car will not run on revolutionary spirit alone. The Asian community are the mechanics, the doctors, the accountants. They are the intricate gears. When they are gone, who runs the refinery? Who prints the currency? Who fixes the power lines?" Mobutu shifted to the economic reality, the language that normally worked with other strongmen, even the erratic ones. "You will not gain control of their wealth, Dada. You will gain control of the debts. You will inherit empty shelves, dry fuel pumps, and silent factories. Your people will starve within 6 months because the distribution network will cease to exist. This is not liberation. It is self-inflicted siege." He concluded the phase by appealing to their shared self-interest as dictators. "Think of the embarrassment, Dada. The world will not see a liberator. They will see a tyrant who destroyed his own economy out of spite. That weakens all of us. It makes the job of every African leader harder. The divine command." Amin listened, surprisingly, with an unusual patience, his huge frame leaning back in his chair, his smile frozen in place. When Mobutu finished, the silence was total, broken only by the wheezing machine. Then, Amin spoke. His voice was lower now, laced with a strange, hypnotic conviction that sent a chill down the spine of Mobutu's translator. "My brother Mobutu," Amin said, his voice rising, "you speak the language of the British banks and the Parisian salons. You speak of logistics, of money, of image. You forget one thing. I serve God." He pushed his chair back and lumbered to his feet, walking to the window that overlooked the beautiful, placid lake. He seemed to draw energy from the view, from the land itself. "You ask me about my tactics. I will tell you where my tactics come from. They came to me in a dream, Mobutu. A clear, powerful vision. God stood before me and said, 'Amin, the foreigners have been sucking the blood of Uganda for too long. They are sitting on the milk, but the African child drinks only water. You must tear out the parasites swiftly and completely, or the curse will remain upon your children.'" He whirled around, his eyes blazing with a frightening mix of sincerity and delusion. 90 days. That is a divine deadline, Mobutu. I am merely the humble implementer. You tell me it is chaos. I say it is the cleansing fire. You tell me the economy will stop. Then let it stop. For a year, we will struggle. But then, for the first time, every shilling earned will remain in the hands of the true sons of Uganda. We will rebuild on a foundation of pure African soil, not on the rotten commerce of the colonizers and their Asian middlemen. Amin's unwavering faith in his vision was Mobutu's true obstacle. Mobutu had dealt with greedy men, insecure men, and corrupt men. He had never dealt with a man who was utterly convinced of his own divine mandate, a man who saw chaos not as a side effect, but as a necessary purification. Logic was useless against this rock of belief. The ultimatum and the parting shot. Mobutu attempted his final strategy, shifting from the persuasive brother to the stern military elder. Dada, he insisted, standing up to meet Amin's gaze. You risk everything. The Chinese will not replace the entire infrastructure. The Libyans will ask for military bases and ideological loyalty. You will isolate yourself from everyone who can help Uganda grow. You will be a pariah. Mobutu played his last card, the open reference to the Western powers. I am here because your friends in Europe and America are worried. They will cut you off entirely. No spare parts. No military supply. You will be weak. Amin simply crossed his massive arms, a shadow of a sneer crossing his face. Ah, the true reason emerges. The darling of the West reveals his masters. You are here, Mobutu, because the white men fear me. They fear the idea that an African leader can say no to their money and their control. They fear the vacuum I am creating. He stepped closer, invading Mobutu's personal space. They pay your bills, brother. They give you the jets and the money to control your people. I respect your loyalty to them. But I answer only to the African people and to God. Let them cut their aid. Let them call me a pariah. They are hypocrites. They created this economic structure and now they complain when I destroy it. I will show the world that Uganda can stand alone. Amin slapped Mobutu jovially on the shoulder, the physical contact radiating immense, untamed strength. The political argument was over. You will go back to Kinshasa, Amin concluded, his tone now almost playful, and you will tell your masters in London and Washington that Idi Amin Dada does not take orders. He gives them. And the only thing he expects is respect. The 90 days stands. Mobutu knew, with a sinking certainty, that he had failed. He had been sent to apply reason to unreason, pragmatism to fanaticism, and calculation to impulse. The polished, Western-educated dictator had failed to sway the divinely guided brute. The Leopard of Zaire had met the Lion of Africa, and the lion was not interested in advice. Aftermath, the silence and the starvation. Mobutu's return journey was silent, the jet a silver hearse carrying the body of a diplomatic failure. Back in Kinshasa, the report was grim. Mobutu had confirmed that Amin was immovable, guided by an internal conviction that transcended political leverage. The West's darling had tried and failed, marking the moment when the old rules of Cold War control fractured in East Africa. The decree was enforced with brutal finality. As the 90-day deadline approached, the terror intensified. Asian families were forced to register, their bank accounts frozen, their properties seized. The departing Asians, many of whose families had lived in Uganda for 3 generations, were permitted to take only a single suitcase and £50. They left behind lifetimes of savings, thriving businesses, and professional careers, a fortune that was supposed to fill the coffers of the Ugandan people. The irony was swift and devastating. Mobutu's prediction came true instantly. The sugar refineries stopped because the Asian managers and engineers were gone. The transport fleet ground to a halt because the mechanics and spare parts suppliers were deported. The retail network collapsed overnight. The markets fell silent, the shelves emptied, and the price of basic necessities skyrocketed. The promised economic revolution became an economic starvation. The factories did not start up under new, untrained African owners. They stood idle and rusted. Uganda descended into a cycle of crippling debt, corruption, as the seized assets were looted by Amin's cronies, and terrifying scarcity. Amin had achieved economic, but at the cost of the entire nation's function. For Mobutu, the failure was a sobering lesson. He realized that while the West could provide the money and the military strength to sustain a rational dictator like himself, they were powerless against a truly irrational one. Amin had exposed the limits of Western influence, not through military might, but through the sheer audacity of his destructive conviction. The darling of the West had been deployed, but the Lion of Africa refused to be tamed, leaving fire and ruin in his wake. The ultimate tragedy was that while Mobutu flew back to his golden cage in Zaire to receive more Western funds, The expelled Asians began the agonizing process of building new lives in Britain, Canada, and India, and the ordinary people of Uganda were left behind to pay the true, bitter price of Amin's divine madness. The day Mobutu failed to convince Amin remains a stark marker in African history. The day political calculation was overwhelmed by pure, destructive will.